Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Samantha Leighanne and I talk about books. Today we are going to be talking about, because you didn't see the thumbnail and you didn't read the title, we're talking about my favorite horror and thrillers of 2019. Let's talk about the fact that most of these were not published in 2019 because I read a lot of backlist titles. So you've probably seen a lot of these on other people's lists at other times. So that's the thing. Also, if you hated these books, that's cool. You're allowed to have your opinion, but I really liked them. I'm not really going in order. This isn't like least to most or whatever, because most of these were rated 5 stars or close to 5 stars. Let's just jump right into some books. First book that I'm going to talk about is The Silent Patient. This is, I think, a debut. And I've read a lot of thrillers and I've read a lot of subpar thrillers, and this one actually like swerved me pretty good. I'm not gonna lie to you. So I did very much enjoy the fact that this was able to get me. I really thought that I had it figured out. Turns out I didn't. So this story follows a famous artist. She is so in love with her husband and her life is so good. And then one day, she kills her husband, and after she kills her husband, she refuses to speak. So enter a man who has just accepted a position at the hospital that she is staying at, and he is just bound and determined that he's gonna be the one to make her talk, right? And then the story kind of progresses from there. You kind of learn that his life isn't exactly what he thought that it was going to be. And he begins to really kind of do some research and explore who she was. It also goes back and forth in perspective. So you have the here and now, which is told from the perspective of the doctor that works in the hospital, and then you're also given the artist's perspective through her old journals, and you're really kind of starting to put things together. And wow, like I said, this swerved the fuck out of me, honestly. There are other aspects of this book that I really liked that talk about the mechanics of love and relationships, just like little poignant nuggets of truth that are sprinkled through this book that I really wasn't expecting, especially in a book of this genre. Not to say that, these types of books can't have those. I just guess the books that I have read haven't really had a lot of those things. So I was very pleasantly surprised by that kind of thing. But if you're looking for a good thriller that has a good twist, I would think that this would be right up your alley. Next on my list is Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin. I don't know how I had gone so long without reading this horror classic, and I've never seen the film. I have been told that the film is excellent, so I do plan on watching it one day. This is about Rosemary, who has married the love of her life. They have moved into a new apartment, and her husband is, I believe, an actor. And they become kind of a close, like familial relationship with a couple of their neighbors. Now, Rosemary's biggest desire is to become pregnant, and she does. But the circumstances are not exactly quite what they seem. Now, I didn't really know what to expect whenever I read this book, because I had an idea in my head of what it was about, and turns out I was very wrong. Not in a bad way, though. I will say that there's a couple of parts in here that are like real fucking cringe. The whole thing surrounding the conception of the baby is very questionable, and it was literally like reading it going, are you fucking serious? Like, is that what? Part of that has to do with the fact that this book was written in 1967. So that's just one of those things to kind of bear in mind. One of the things that it is very hard to do is to read an older book through a modern lens. Like, we can call out the things that we find problematic, but it's important to not let those things detract from the book itself. So while I was literally like, what the actual fuck is happening right now, like the story as a whole, I really fucking loved. This is absolutely on my list of favorite horror books, which I'm pretty sure this actually did make my list of favorite horror books. If you want to know what my favorite horror books are, I already did a video on that. You can click the little link in the up here somewhere at the top of the screen. I'll go ahead and post that if you haven't seen that yet. But yeah, loved this book. One of my favorite horrors I read this year. Violet by Scott Thomas. This is Scott Thomas's second book. His first was Kill Creek, which I read last year. I think it was last year. Maybe it was the year before. I don't remember. It was really good. I really liked it. I also really, really liked this. One of the things that I love about the horror genre as a whole, it's about so much more than being scared. One of the things that I do love about this book is the way that it explores grief. And let me tell you what I mean by that by telling you a little bit about the plot if you're unfamiliar. Chris has memories of a lake house where she spent a lot of her summers, and unfortunately it's also where they brought her mother as she was passing away from a terminal illness. So fast forward a couple of decades, and Chris's husband is taken from her tragically in a car accident, I believe. And as a way to help her and her daughter grieve, her father has always been in possession of this lake house. And she decides that in order for them to really like grieve and be by themselves, they're gonna go stay in this lake house for the summer. One of the things that I liked about this book is you're dealing with an unreliable narrator. However, I do feel like it's done very well. And again, the emotions that it explores throughout the book and the feelings of grief and how we deal with those things, you know, how we deal with emotional trauma, I think were done very well. Now, one thing that I will say, this is a very slow burn. It's thick, so if that's not something that you're really into, I don't know if this would be the book for you. I was really anticipating reading this book, seeing as it was his follow-up to his debut work that I love so much, and I was definitely not disappointed, so definitely recommend. We're going back to thriller territory, and we're going with The Chestnut Man. This is, I believe, a debut work, if I remember correctly. However, the author of this has written a lot for TV, and that definitely comes across in this book. So you can see it is very large. It takes place in Copenhagen, and there is a serial killer that's on the loose, and he leaves these little chestnut men at each of his crime scenes, and they are very brutal. It's very awful. And this follows the detective that is involved in the case. So one of the things that I loved about this book is it is very fast-paced. I did mention that the author is a screenwriter, and sometimes you can read a book and it feels like a screenplay and it just doesn't feel very good. There's not a lot of emotion in it. I feel like he fleshed this out really well. So it had a lot of action in it from the get-go. You're going, trying to figure out what's going on. There's not really, for it being a book the size that it is, I don't really feel like there was a lot of lull, so the pacing was really good. But like I said, it doesn't feel like you're reading necessarily a screenplay. You know, it feels like you're reading a fully fleshed out novel, which is really nice. So the pacing was really good, and there were a couple parts of this that were pretty gruesome, I'm not gonna lie to you, which for obvious reasons I appreciated. Definitely a detective thriller, so if that's up your alley, I would recommend. But this is another one that I wouldn't necessarily say swerved me, but it just it grabbed me from the beginning and it didn't let me go until the very end. And even when I did thought that I have it figured out, I realized at the last minute that I didn't, and you know, was able to kind of discern what was actually happening. You know, again, kudos for not being too predictable, for having been somebody who's read a lot of detective dramas and or detective thrillers and things like that. So did really enjoy that for that reason. Next book on my list, and you guys can, first of all, let me point out that this is definitely in the thriller category. This isn't a horror. This might be slightly controversial, and honestly I don't care because this is my fucking list. And that is The Institute by Stephen King. I am not one of those people that is under the impression that Stephen King can do no wrong, because this is an author that appears on my best of and worst of list this year. But this was his release for this year. It follows a young child who is abducted from his home. He has some type of telekinetic ability that he's still trying to figure out, and is brought to a place called the Institute. I'm not going to go too far into detail on the plot because I think a lot of people have already talked about this book. I very much enjoyed it. The end kind of took a little bit away from me, the kind of epilogue-ish type thing, but overall I thought that it was a really strong book. It really, again, grabbed me and kept me going. I liked the characters. If you liked Firestarter, if you've read Firestarter and you liked that, I do think that this is a book that you would enjoy. One of the things that I also really liked is this takes place in a nowhere town in South Carolina. For those of you that aren't aware, I am from South Carolina. This is a place that does not actually exist. However, he does talk about where it would be in relation to places that actually exist, that I have actually been. And so it was really kind of cool to see places that I have been, you know, and the place that I have lived all of my life represented in in a book. I always really enjoy whenever I can read things that take place in Charleston or, you know, Low Country or anything like that, just because I don't see it super often. So I did really enjoy that. Again, like I said, I really enjoyed the character. Pacing was really good. Just overall, I thought that it was a really, really strong book, which was great. Follow-up from The Outsider last year. Absolutely loved The Outsider. Elevation, not so much, but that's neither here nor there. So was very pleasantly surprised. Once again, we're talking about a thriller. That thriller is Recursion by Blake Crouch. Blake Crouch is another author who appears on my best of and worst of list this year. I have enjoyed most of the things that I have read from him. That's been really nice, and this book was no exception. This is about a woman who's dedicated her life to really trying to figure out the secrets behind memory loss and really trying to find a way to reverse those things. Really kind of protect those memories. She's trying to unlock the secret to memory before it's too late for her mother. Unfortunately, she does pour her life's work into this, gets involved in a company that has less than good intentions, and subsequently, once she makes her breakthroughs, things start happening that shouldn't be happening. Enter a detective who is suddenly living these two separate strands of memory and can't exactly figure out why, and, you know, basically goes on a mission to figure out exactly what is going on. Another book with really good pacing. I really liked the story. I enjoyed the characters. I just overall thought that this was a really strong book. The ideas behind the technology and things like that were also like really cool, and it almost felt like it's something that could exist at some point, and I really liked that. This is definitely in the realm of like science fiction thriller. To me, Blake Crouch has just continually gotten better and better as I've continued to read his books and as he's, you know, continued to come out with them. So I would count him in the list of like favorite authors, and I'm looking forward to see what he does next. Next, we're going to talk about Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. I really liked this book. It was a lot of fun. So think evil mermaids from the depths of the ocean, but they're not really mermaids. Basically, these people put together a mission that are going down into the depths of the ocean to figure out whether or not this myth, you know, the myth of mermaids, is in fact real or not. And so you have this giant cast of characters, all of which have different specialties, all of which have some kind of stake in proving whether or not this is something that actually exists. Well, spoiler, it does exist. And the atmosphere in which Mira Grant writes, which for those of you that are not familiar, Mira Grant is Seanan McGuire, who is the author of the Wayward Children's series. So, but this is a lot more like horror oriented. Anyway, as I said, the atmosphere that you get pulled into, this like atmosphere of like claustrophobia and like, I don't know, I just really enjoyed the way that it was written. I really loved the characters. There's so much inclusion in this book as well. When we talk about the cast of characters, it's not just a bunch of white people that are on a boat. Like, there's people from varying backgrounds, people that have different things going on, people with different disabilities. All of them are coming together to like accomplish this goal. But it didn't feel forced, and that was also really important to me as well. I wouldn't recommend reading this at the beach or if you're on a boat. I feel like if I had like read this while I was at the beach, I would have been like, nope, I'm never getting into the water again, which I might not ever get into the water again. We'll see. But I really, really liked this. This is definitely one of my favorites from Mira Grant / Seanan McGuire, for sure. And the last book that I'm going to talk about is The Grip of It. Read this one on my e-reader. And this is a haunted house story. For those of you that don't know, I really like haunted house stories. I plan on doing a haunted house recommendations video at some point, so be on the lookout for that. However, yeah, this is a book that I just really enjoyed. The writing is simplistic, and it goes back and forth from the perspective of the husband and the wife that have moved into this house. They've bought this house. I can't remember if it was like sight unseen, but they needed to get out of the city. It was kind of like they needed to get out of the city. It was their last chance. They had been having some problems. You know, they're gonna buy this house, they're gonna live in it, they're gonna reconnect, you know, they're gonna do all of these things. And it doesn't exactly go the way that it's supposed to. Each of them start experiencing different things and seeing them both kind of unravel as this goes. It speaks a lot to I think relationships and like marital relationships, you know, the honesty between husband and wife and things like that, I really liked that. But again, the simplistic writing style I think really worked for it, and just the writing style itself really like created this atmosphere, which I really enjoyed. So I think that I do have one or two other books by this author, and I did so much enjoy that I'm really looking forward to reading something else from this author as well. So, and those are my favorite books that I read this year. So, favorite horror thriller books that I read this year. Have you read any of these? Comment down below and let me know if you have. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Tell me all about it. Just remember to keep it spoiler free for those people that haven't read them yet. If you do want to discuss spoilers, you can get at me through Twitter, Goodreads, and Instagram. All of those links can be found in the down bar below. If this is your first time here, hi, hello, welcome. If you like what you see and you want to see more, you can, you know, click thumbs up. You can hit subscribe if you haven't already, or you can hit the little bell icon, you know, be notified whenever I upload and all that good stuff. Yeah, as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.